3:01, so we're already a minute late. We will have an invocation first, and I'm going to ask our Senator Billy Hickman to do that for us, if you could. You're Mike 6, I believe, there.
Yeah, thank you. Let us pray. Lord God, what a great day you've given us, Lord. You've given us another day to honor you, Lord, and you've given us another day to work for the great citizen of Georgia. Lord, we just ask you to guide us and direct us through our thoughts. In your Son's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, we've got a bill that had passed out last year that died on the floor, and the Honorable House member has come back to re-present it to the committee again. We've got some date changes we need to make on it if the committee does decide to pass it out again. The fiscal note from last year is in the folder as well, and we had some copies that got left downstairs, but I think they're arriving now. And we've got a couple of new people too we should probably introduce. We've got a new ledge counsel, lost our Wake Forest lawyer, Blake Travis, to private industry, as so happens with several that we've had. If you want to stand up and introduce yourself, you can come to the mic here where they can hear you.
Hello, I am Christy Farhoody, and I will be helping out this session.
All right. And then our intern this year, if you want to come up and introduce yourself.
Hey, how's it going, guys? My name is Pedro Simano. I'll be working with Senator Huffzeller this upcoming session.
And tell them your majors at Georgia State.
I'm Georgia State senior, and I am majoring in finance with a minor in computer information systems.
So I think all the other players are from here before last year, so that's the only new players. So with that, if you want to give us a brief presentation of your bill, or if the committee needs to hear it again asking questions, go ahead with us. Your mic's hot now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to members of the committee, thank you for allowing me the chance to come back before you for Senate substitute on House Bill 82. As you can remember, this bill was passed out of this committee on last session, and it got to the floor but did not get a hearing on the floor before the clock ran out on us. This is a rural physician tax credit bill that will allow us to incentivize recruitment of medical students to our rural communities, and also to keep physicians in our rural communities. It also includes dentists in rural communities as well as physicians. This bill was worked on through your committee last year. Some changes were made, and we were in agreement with those changes that were made through this committee, but we just didn't get enough time to get it across the finish line before the clock struck 12 on sine die of 2023. But it's the same bill that you worked on. We believe that you did some good changes on this bill and made it so that it's a really good bill. But thank you for all the work that you did on it.
All right, and I will add that a few years ago we did a few bills after the clock struck 12, so
well,
that doesn't always mean anything around here, depending on the rules. All right, any questions from the committee on the bill? Again, this was passed out before. The fiscal impact is fairly minimal. Senator Beach.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the rural county, I guess it says on line 16 through 19, talking about 65 persons per square mile, and that's from the census of 1990?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because, I mean, some of these communities with all the economic development projects we've announced are not going to be rural forever. I mean, they're going to be growing with the Hyundai plant, all these plants that are being built, all Rivian and so on. But this is all based on 1990 data. Does it get updated to 2020 data or anything, or we're going to just still stay at 1990 data?
Well, when we talked about the changes, that wasn't included in it. It was still in just the 1990 data.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fully supportive because we need to have doctors in rural Georgia.
Yes, sir.
But I just want to make sure that, you know, if they grow, they can continue to get that tax credit, even if they go over 100 beds. If they get CON and want to add to the hospital, I still want them to get their tax credit.
Sure, we'll be agreeable to that if the committee sees fit.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Albers.
Yeah, Senator Beach, I think, brings up a good point. It does say, and any future such census, but it does make sense. Why would we not be at the 2020 census, not 30 years old? Seems like a logical amendment if the author would be amenable to it.
I'm very much agreeable to it, Senator.
Thank you.
Okay, well, don't see any other questions. We've got some amendments that are needed. Wait, there's, I believe that's our Chair of Appropriations. Is that your mic?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I think it does say that. If you're looking at line 50, it says or any future census. So tell me if I'm wrong on there. And then if you also look back at line 17, not this the end. I can't even say that word. 1990 or any future census. So y'all tell me if you still think it's needed. My question, I have two of them. One, I do see the standard repeal section in 2028, which will be a 4-year sunset on line 39, but that's only as to section 1. The policy of this committee has been to set a sunset on all tax credits. I don't know that we have one on this one, which, while we may be okay with this policy, I do think having that sunset allows us to revisit things like Senator Beach brought up today. If we did not have that future census language, it's a reason to come back to the table and look at those things. The second is, that's my first question, the sunset. The second is, why, I don't know that I completely right now, I'm asking for someone who can read faster than me to tell me, I understand we're adding dentists, but I don't understand how this changes the tax credit that was already in code in section 1. Does anybody, because if you look in section 1, start like line 25ish, it's $5,000 tax credit for 5 years. It can't be used against, can't exceed the taxpayer's income liability. If I flip to section 2, well, first of all, at the bottom of that, section 1's repealed in 2028. In section 2, we add dentist, physician. Looks like they're named the same. Maybe there's a change in definition there. And it's a $5,000 credit for every 12-month period, not to exceed 5 years. So I'm just wondering, is all this doing is adding dentist, or is there something more to it that I'm missing?
I'll let you answer that.
We the only two occupations we talked about were dentists and the doctors, the physicians.
So the question is this just adding dentist or to this, or have we done something else?
Just adding dentists to it.
Okay. All right, and I think it is a good point that we routinely put sunsets on everything just because they may be great. We still like to look at them on a periodic basis and make sure that the world hadn't changed.
Okay.
So we do want to do that, I would think, as a committee process.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something else? It looks like the definition of rural county expands, including military bases and installations, which I don't know that that's necessarily a problem, but I'm just wondering why, if it was as easy as adding dentist, why would we write a new code section? Why would we not just come in what was old section 1 and add dentist? Right.
Not yet.
Okay, well, we're in the,
What was that you wanted to add?
The discussion of the committee was about the sunset of adding that, but I'll leave that to the committee.
so we've got the sunset, we've got some dates that need changing,
Okay.
and I'm not sure if our Chair of Appropriations had another thing you wanted to change in there as well. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Do you have a? Okay, go ahead. Senator Estevez.
I did, Mr. Chairman. And just to piggyback off the appropriations chair, I'm curious, just because it does seem like it's two different programs, and I just want to make sure that my understanding of the bill was correct. Is this two different tax credits?
No, it was never meant to be two different tax credits, just the same tax credit, and we added dentists in there.
Okay. Because there are some differences between the two sections. The new section has not only redefines rural county, but it also adds a cap of $2 million to the tax credit, which I did not see in section 1. And then there's some other restrictions here. I mean, I'm generally okay with it. I just pointing it. It just seems like two different programs.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got some concerns from several people. We may have to bring you back. I apologize for that, but we want to
No problem.
hash this out with Ledge Council, make sure everybody's good on this. This is what we passed out last year, but there's some concern that maybe we shouldn't have passed it out in this form last year. So we'll visit on this again.
Okay.
On that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So the second bill we have today, I'm the sponsor of, so I'm going to go get in the hot seat and let Vice Chairman Albers take over here. And I will say this is a hearing only today on this bill. We're just starting the process.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we've got Senate Bill 349, making sure we have the right LC, 432939. Is that correct? All right.
On my notes up here yet, and get to it in the folder here. That's correct.
Wonderful. All right, take it away.
All right. Well, we've probably all heard more about property taxes than any other issue in the last year, and it's been an issue for many years. I know I dealt with it on the county commission for 8 years, and had actually put in for the county in 2002 a homestead property freeze, which is still in effect, and the county has still survived and thrived with it. I believe our chairman of appropriations did the same when he was on the county commission. And in fact, there are 39 Georgia counties, 35 cities, and 27 school systems that have some sort of a local law limiting assessed value. So what this bill does is it addresses several issues. One is the escalating value. We've seen property tax increases due to just solely assessed value on homeowners of 25, 30, even 40% on the bill. And so this addresses this by saying there can only be a 3% cap on this assessment increase by a floating homestead. Same as we've done on the freezes, it can only go up by 3%. Some other things it does for the local governments is, as long as you don't increase above that cap, your millage rate, and you stay within that cap, you don't have to advertise the tax increase anymore that they advertise, so that these can be very confusing to people to have these advertised. Another issue is the estimated tax number on the bill. It quite often does not contain, for instance, the $500 the state put in there, many of the exemptions that are in there. It's never a right number. It's always wrong, and it really stirs people up. And so this wrong number would not be on there anymore because it's totally incorrect number. And then a third issue has to do with appeals. We've had many people that, in my opinion, have gamed the system. They have a tax appeal that puts their value at 85%, and then they don't show up for the hearings, and it just stays frozen at 85%, and it stays frozen, and they just never show up for the appeals. So this can go over years. And so what this says is you do still go to the 85% if you appeal, but if you don't show up for a hearing, you don't get to keep the 85%. The advantage to the tax assessors in this is the tax assessors quite often are in a catch-22, I guess you might say. They can raise the value of what they should put it at, the most accurate number, and the whole community's mad at them. They cannot raise it up, and they don't meet the digest. We tax on 40% of the value. If you don't hit 36 to 44%, the Department of Revenue says you're out of compliance. And as a matter of fact, 33 counties right now are out of compliance, according to the report I received on Saturday from the Department of Revenue. And so you either pay a penalty for not being in compliance, or you make everybody mad. That's the tax assessor's life. This would say you can raise it what you think is accurate, but the taxes are only gonna go up for the homeowners on that 3% maximum level that you could do. That is the essence of the bill. There's some other things that we need to make sure in this process that we take care of, that those that have freezes will stay in place. I want to double clarify the language after this hearing. And I think there's been possibly an issue where the digest is now projected now instead of what used to be. And this, Senator Chip Rogers did a rewrite in 2010 of the property tax, and some of this came about from then, but we just had a lot of recession times and people wanted to make sure that their house changed in value quicker. Well, it's also made it change quicker going the other way. And it's using numbers that are projected that, to my understanding, that are hard to deal with. So those are some of the issues we want to address in this, and I can certainly go through different line numbers with the committee and hear your questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a great bill, and I would just say that this is definitely in need. People throughout the state have felt a lot of pain here. You know, similar to what you and Chairman Tillery did, Senator Beach and I did this several years ago for North Fulton County, along with our colleagues in the House. And we reset all the values to the lowest amount they were in the years 2016, 17, and 18, and then did a 3% cap or the CPI, whichever was lower. And that has really helped our homeowners, because a lot of them now would have 100 or 200% increases, and we would have taxed people out of their house. Hopefully this will help the entire system. I've got a similar bill that I know we're working on, but I applaud you for bringing this forward, as well as I think, if I understand in your bill, you're also giving some relief to the local governing bodies if they keep that increase of 3% or less, and they wouldn't have to go through the normal process of showing that they're going to have a tax increase. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I've got a question. I believe that's Senator Dolezal. Is that your right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, number 11. I've got a couple questions, if it's okay. First of all, similar to Chairman Albers, that we passed in Forsyth County, we'll have on the ballot this year a cap on floating homestead exemptions for the school portion of the tax at 4%. I'm happy to see that move to 3%. I believe you referenced this, but just want to clarify it. Forsyth County on the county M&O currently has a floating homestead of 0%. So once you're locked in, it's locked until you sell the home, and that it's your intention to ensure that that stays at.
We're going to clarify the language and make sure that that is part of the bill. We of course had Blake Travis do this to begin with, and that was the intention he had, and of course he left us. So I want to make sure with current Ledge Council that that's in place in the bill.
I just want to flag a couple of thoughts for you, if I can, as you continue
Okay.
to work on this. Currently, I believe state law requires that if you win an appeal, your value is locked, your assessed value is locked at that value that it was appealed at for 3 years.
Okay.
I want to ensure that that remains the case. I haven't heard as much of the gamesmanship around the 85%. I thought you still had to eventually re-up. So happy to hear you close that loophole. There's no reason, apart from the anomaly of last year of us doing the $500 homeowners tax refund, there's no reason why the estimates should be wrong. And so I would rather see us figure out why they're wrong and clean that up than getting rid of them altogether. Because the second thing that I would add is that this bill deals with homeowners claiming a homestead exemption. But it's not going to do anything for anyone who owns commercial property taxes or anyone who either owns a home for rent or it's a second home. And to the extent that those people will still continue to see backdoor increases via assessment increases, I still want to keep that accountability on the local government where they do have to essentially advertise a property tax increase if they do not do a rollback. I want to keep the pressure on to do rollbacks, I think goes away a little bit. So I would just like to ask you to consider that. And then lastly, I'm wondering for the base year, do you just capture the previous year? And
Correct.
Do we want to look at something like what Chairman Albers and Beach did, where it captured over a period of time, either a lower value or average value? Because we've seen in some areas, I think as much as 50% increases on assessed values over the last 3 years. But I applaud you for this bill in general. I think that it's overdue, and I'm certainly supportive of it in concept.
And again, I'm trying to work out a reasonable compromise that would limit the values but would also pass. And so I'm certainly open to any suggestions in that area.
And I did drop a bill today that would reset it to the lowest value between 2020, 21, and 22 that we'll probably discuss at a future meeting. Okay, I got a question. Senator Tillery, are you still looking for a question?
A question.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Senator Hofstadler and Senator Albers. Mr. Chairman, the question I have is, I'm looking at the definition of adjusted base value, and I understand it can increase by 3%. What happens if I take my house that's 2,000 square feet and I push out the back and I add 2,000 more square feet? Is the local taxing authority locked to only raise my assessment by 3%?
That's what I believe we have in the bill, and I'll have to look for the line number, but that if you put on a $50,000 addition, that it would go up 50,000, but wouldn't as what currently is the law in some places where they go reevaluate the whole piece of property. It would only go up by the addition that you put on there.
Okay.
And I believe that's part of the challenge that exists in the property tax today. You know, let's say you remodel the kitchen in your house. So you're not adding to the structure. You pull all the permits, you do all the right things, then your house gets reevaluated at $50,000 or $100,000 more. Well, there's no additional cost to the city, the county, the school. So you actually, today we're penalizing people for improving their home. I understand if you built a 2,000 square foot addition, because then that might require more services in order to service your house in time of need, but we have to come up with a better solution there. Other questions? Questions from Senator Orrock. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hofstadler, there's been a lot of concern that the commercial properties in my county are being grossly undervalued and undertaxed, and more of the tax burden being put on the residential owners. Is that something that you have any familiarity with in general or in particular?
I've heard those stories. It's not in my district, so I haven't really looked at it a lot, but I have heard, evidence from people that said that they're being undervalued.
Well, yeah, it would be a strict contradiction to what the property, the transfer of the property, or a new owner, whatever, what they paid would just not, it'd be grossly undervalued when there was public knowledge and public record about of how much the property cost when it changed hands, and it would seem that all of that, pushing the tax burden more and more on residential as opposed to commercial is a problem to me, and that's just something I'd like to hear more from you on going forward.
My intent of this bill is to protect people who want to stay in their home,
exactly.
quite often are retired and fixed income, and not be subject to massive tax increases that they have. And so Florida did this same thing and actually used 3% in their bill as well. And we're trying to protect people who don't want to get taxed out of their home.
Oh, it's a big concern across my county. Thank you.
Senator Estevez.
I echo my colleague from the 36th concern about commercial properties and what we can do to give counties the tools to appropriately adjudicate those appeals. One of the things that I appreciate about this bill, Mr. Chairman, is the fact that by alleviating the county's docket related to homesteaded property appeals, you're actually allowing them to use those resources to then focus more on commercial appeals. Because right now, there's a lot of time split between residential appeals and commercial appeals. By cleaning up this process a bit, it would allow our counties to focus more on those commercial properties, which take up a significant amount more resources. I also appreciate and wanted to ask you more, well, not even ask you, I wanted to also appreciate the fact that it does allow local municipalities and counties to not be distracted by the rollback advertisements, which as a former local government official found to always be deceiving, and as several of us have talked about, not necessarily required by other entities, including the state of Georgia, when the state of Georgia does not roll back its taxes. So appreciate that we're going back to where we should be, which is focused on not confusing taxpayers and being transparent with taxpayers on where their taxes are going.
Other questions from the committee members? Seeing none, we've got 4 people signed up to speak. First one, no stranger to this committee. Dante, would you like to come up from ACCG and sit next to the chairman?
Good afternoon, Chairman Albers, members of the Finance Committee. Just wanted to express ACCG's support for the package that is in Senate Bill 349. I think would make a lot of very positive changes.
Questions for ACCG? That was great. Thank you. See if everybody can follow your same suit here. Next, from GSBA, Justin Panley. Come on forward.
Thank you. Chairman Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Just have a few comments around the bill, so just going to read a couple of notes here. We recognize and understand the issues that this bill is addressing, as do our membership. Many school districts have taken steps to ease the burden on their constituents, as local homestead exemptions have been created based on age and or income. In 2023, 110 districts decreased their millage rates, 57 held them in place with no change, and only 13 increased their millage, mostly by less than half a point. There have been a good faith effort to adjust these rates, taking into consideration the increased rates of inflation, which increases the cost of doing business. We would respectfully request a fiscal note to be done to look at the impact on the school districts, counties, and cities, as well as the state. Although the state does not collect ad valorem taxes, the property tax digest impacts state funding in the QBE formula in the calculation for the 5 mil share deduction and equalization. We appreciate most of the bill and what it addresses, but do have concerns around the statewide floating tax exemption, which caps property tax at 3%. School districts are constitutionally capped at 20 mils. Districts whose digest is largely residential would be particularly hard hit. It would create a system in which places more of the responsibility for funding local services on new property owners if prices are rising and on local business owners. This could impact some economic development efforts. Assessments will not always continue to increase as they have in the last few years. The housing market will slow at some point. And we just thank the opportunity to address the committee.
Thank you. You've got a question, Justin, from Senator Dolezal.
Thank you. You mentioned 110 did rollbacks. What was the approximate size of a typical rollback? My understanding was that most of them were less than 0.25%, and that there was only one that was over a quarter mil rollback. Is that accurate?
We do have the report. I don't know the numbers right off the top of my head.
Would you mind getting a copy of that? I'd love to see that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
Yeah, why don't you send that to the committee and we can distribute it out. Diego
I've
here will
also
take care of
got the report from the Department of Revenue that would give the same numbers. I'll get that to the committee as well.
Got a question from Senator Tillery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering how you would set up a fiscal note, because a fiscal note would have to, the revenue would be, I guess you would assume it's neutral unless the commission or the Board of Education is raising the millage rate. So without knowing how much they're going to raise the millage rate, I'm not sure how we could factor in what a fiscal note is going to show you zero.
I don't have an answer to your question. I'm sorry, but I can definitely look into it for you.
And
Had
if
the
I
same-
could,
had
if
the
I
same
could add, I'm working with the Department of Fiscal Audits on that very issue to see if there is any fiscal impact to QPE formula or something. So that was brought up, and so we decided we needed to address that.
Other questions for Justin? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Steve Swindell, come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
This is one of mine. Be nice to him now.
I'm the Cherokee County Chief Appraiser, and I serve as the Legislative Director for our tax assessor group in the state. And I'm just here to let you all know that we are neutral on this bill as the tax assessors of the state on a whole. Speaking on behalf of Cherokee County, my only caution is that we are a county that has a floating homestead, and it does get a little dicey explaining to taxpayers how the whole process works, and this would complicate that process to a certain extent. I believe it has the potential to, but other than that, we're okay.
Can I ask a question?
Of course, Mr. Chairman, go right ahead.
So your floating homestead exemption, is that a freeze, a 3% cap? How does that work?
It's a freeze on the county M&O, and then 2 of the cities have it too. So it would cause us, in this case, I believe, to maintain a second base rate, obviously, if this passes, and then adjust by the percentage of 3% or less, whatever is less. I mean, we can do it.
So the
We can do
same
it,
in
but-
my county, we've got a freeze on the city and the county, not on the schools. So they've got that freeze they keep in place. The schools are different, so it's still gonna be 2 numbers, I
Sure.
think. I think the math's workable there.
Okay.
You got another question from Senator Beach?
Thank you for being here, and I represent part of Cherokee County.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us your appeals, have they went up in this past tax?
Yes, sir. Somebody mentioned earlier that the whole deal about property values increasing, digest increasing, and tax assessors still being caught failing in their audit. And that is what happened in Cherokee this year. We've had massive increases, tried to keep up with the market. Our numbers look good. The state says they don't. But yeah, we had a
So-
massive increase in appeals this year.
Can you tell us how much?
Yeah, we typically average about 3,000 a year, and it jumped to 8,500 this year.
I mean, that's a big increase now, and I don't get offended by this, but that tells me, I don't know how you assess the property, but somebody's assessing it wrong if you have that many appeals in the citizens' mind. They think it's too much. I'm just not, I will tell you, I think property tax is one of the most regressive taxes we have, and I want to just give you my personal example. I've been in the same house for 31 years. I paid $169,000 for that house in Alpharetta. Today, my last assessment was at $885,000. Now, I'm glad it's went up in value, but I haven't put $716,000 worth of improvements in that house. And I haven't realized the gain. I think it should almost be like when you sell stock. You don't pay the capital gains tax till you sell the stock. And I just think we're hurting people. We're forcing people out of their houses. And I have a problem with that. I think so I want to thank Chairman Huffstetter for at least bringing this to where we have a 3% cap. But we just need to be careful because some of these people aren't going to be able to stay in their houses. And I just kind of wanted to get that off my chest a little bit. I didn't really have a question as much as I'm worried about. I guess my other question is, how does the tax assessor value the property? Do they go on Zillow? How does that work?
It's ad valorem. It's according to value. We look at all the deeded transactions that occur in the county for a given year and adjust our values to the deeded prices as closely as we can, and then have to adjust everybody else accordingly. So this year we had about, for 2023, we had about 6,000 qualified deeds that we looked at, and made those adjustments based on those deeds, and we do it every year, just trying to adjust to those values from that prior year deed cachet. And you know, it's gotten to the point where the market in these last few years, I will say, adjusted so rapidly that from the beginning of the year, deeds in January versus deeds in December, you might have a particular neighborhood where the values jumped $100,000 on the same house in that 12-month span. So trying to get our values in line with any kind of accuracy, you know, we end up having to focus in more at the end of the year and things that we're just not really comfortable or accustomed to doing. And the state, on the flip side, on the Department of Audit side, hasn't really been a friend to us either, because they're focusing on January 1st only, and they want us to adjust our values to January 1st. And if we did that, I think we'd have had substantially more than 8,500 appeals.
No, well, I didn't mean
No.
anything by that. I just, when you have that kind of jump in appeals, something happened. You follow me?
Well, it's
And
it's
I'm,
that
look,
market.
I hope I can sell my house for $885 when I bought it for $169. Then I'll be a happy camper. But right now, I'm not. I'm just making the point that I haven't put $700,000 worth of improvements in the house to be taxed on, in my opinion. So,
Understood.
thank you.
Understood.
If I could ask one question of him while he's up here too. You talked about the January 1st date. I've been told that it wasn't always that way on January 1st, that you used to not have to project forward as a tax assessor. You may not have been in it before 2010, but.
I've been in since '95.
Okay.
But yeah, it's always been January 1st is the date of appraisal in Georgia. But you could count on the market being slow enough that, you know, if you saw a 3 to 4% expansion in market over the course of a year, you could target kind of a middle of the year number. So you'd end up with an overall ratio that would be around July, you know, somewhere. But you wouldn't be that far out of whack by the end of the year. Well, in this market, we end up being way out of whack by the end of the year. So we've had to change the way we do things.
So
as a
you're doing
result of that.
assessments all year long.
They're asking us to trend. If we had a sale in February, they're saying, well, trend that value to
January
January
1st.
1st.
Okay,
And,
that's where the problem
you know,
is.
those
Okay.
people that bought in February and March that's going to be a problem.
Okay.
You know.
Which I think we all agree, and amen to what Senator Beach said. None of it really makes sense. They dropped in 2009 like a rock, right? And then they came up, but our house is worth exactly what one person's willing to pay for it any given day, and that's why I applaud Senator Huffstetter for the work he's doing. Senator Tillery, did you have a question still, or did you turn your light off?
I'm just picking off your expertise here. In Georgia, we have this weird system where we tax on 40% of the full value. Why would we? It would change practically nothing to tax on 100% of the value. You could totally just drop the millage rate accordingly and get the exact same number. Is there a reason to do that? And does your office, if we were to make that change in the middle of these other changes, would it save you any time or create any efficiency for you?
I think that it would create a tremendous amount of transparency with the taxpayers. I do applaud that effort. However, I think the major stumbling block seems to be, according to the legal scholars that I've consulted about this, the constitutional local amendments for homestead exemptions. Those are all set at a value, and that value is based on the 40%. And you can't just, I don't believe you can even just legislate that correction to multiply by 2.5. I think it would have to go back to the voters, and you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of those exemptions that exist out there. So I think that that's really the holdup. And as far as the code section goes, I don't know that it would be that dramatic to change it. There's not that many places. I mean, there probably are that we don't know about, but you know, we'd rely on you all to find those places that it exists. But from a tax assessment standpoint, I'm all for it. We have to answer that question a lot. The reason for it, I've been told, was years ago, before really any attention was paid to fair market value and keeping up with fair market value, people just returned their value to the tax assessor's office or to the county, and typically they'd return it at about 40% value. So then the state came in and said, we got to stop that. Everybody's got to get up to fair market value. We got to do what's right. So, you know, they forced the revaluation way back when. And it turned out that there was that difference. So they said, all right, we're going to assess everybody at 40, but the values are going to be at 100. That could be a wives' tale. I don't know. I've never heard it expressed any other way but that. But that's my understanding of how that came to be.
Thank you.
As always, you're a wealth of knowledge, Steve. Thank you. Are there other questions? I saw some lights go on and some lights go off. Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, last person signed up to talk, Suzanne.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for having me. I am Suzanne Weidenhouse. I'm the Chief Appraiser of Muskogee County. And I was asked to come to talk about homestead freezes and their effect historically, because Muskogee County has the longest homestead freeze in existence in the state of Georgia. Ours was implemented, it was enacted in '82 and implemented in '83. Now, we are a consolidated government, so it's Columbus, Muskogee County. And our homestead freeze is a 0%. In other words, there is no inflationary aspect to our homestead freeze. You lock in, you lock in. And we have a lot of history to talk about what that does over the course of time. And there are implications to freezes that have 0% increases built into them, or 3% or 5% or 10%, just depends. Ours is a 0%, and what that has done is that has shifted our tax burden. It's the newcomer's tax, basically. It has shifted that tax burden to our businesses and to new businesses coming into town and to non-homesteaded properties and folks who buy their property. And I've got a really good example. I've got a house in our historic neighborhood of Uptown in Columbus that was homesteaded in the early 80s. Right around the corner is another house that's almost identical that was homesteaded in the 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. Both of them valued right about $300,000. One pays $7.19 in tax, and the other's tax bill is over $3,000. And this is what happens. So when you talk about an inflationary cap of 3%, that's great because it allows for some reset, but you need to be aware, if you look at the history of values over the course of time here in the state of Georgia, and I kind of took it back to about 1980 thereabouts, you're going to find that your increases are 4.39% on average. That takes into consideration the downturn that we had, the little downturn we had in the 90s, and then again in 2008 when we had the big downturn. And then it takes into consideration the hyperinflation that we have seen in 2021, 22 timeframe. So you're averaging about 4.39%. What's that mean? If you cap at 3%, you're not going to keep up. Now, it took 10 years in Muskogee County before they realized, whoops, we made a mistake. And they tried to roll it back. They tried to repeal that freeze and put something different into place, and they couldn't claw it back. Once it's in place, it's impossible to claw back. So I'm here, they asked me to come to talk about what this means historically. And so I would just caution that any kind of inflationary increase that's put into place, you take into consideration the history, because what you don't want to happen is what's happened in Muskogee County, which is the fact that we have a great workforce, we have a great school system, we have a great community, we have lovely river access, we are the Savannah of the West, we're a great community, and we struggle to bring businesses in because we have shifted our tax burden. The freeze cost us about $56 million in tax revenue that had to come from somewhere else because the county's not spending less. They're still going to provide all of the wonderful services that we enjoy. Somebody has to pay for those. So that's $56 million that was shifted over to non-homesteaded and businesses. And what happens is in order to encourage new businesses to come, we have to then offer greater exemptions and all of that. So now we're going to penalize our existing businesses. Very comparable county that does not have our homestead freeze. Still has a military base, still has a river, borders another state that has good industry to it, lots of hospitals. So we've got everything kind of similar. I don't know if any of you have guessed. I'm talking about Augusta Richmond County, another consolidated government. We're about the same size. We're a couple thousand people apart, a couple thousand citizens apart size-wise. They are so much larger than we are because they've been able to draw businesses to them because they have a lower millage rate. They have a lower sales tax rate. We have had to put all of this in place to make up for the differences that our freeze has caused, the shifting of the tax burden to the businesses that we need to come to us. So that is the one thing I would caution. There's lots of great stuff in this bill that I really, really like, and that, you know, I as a fellow chief appraiser with Mr. Swindell back there, you know, we really do appreciate the focus that has been on the tax assessor's office in trying to clarify for the taxpayer, and it does get very confusing for the taxpayer. I have some concerns about how this is going to work with the 3% versus what we already have in place. Ours affects our school already, so we don't have that burden there. But this has the ability to adjust back if there's a downturn, whereas the one in Muskogee County cannot adjust downward for a downturn in the market. So our folks that locked in 2008 and then the market tanked in 2009, it took them, some of them all the way up until 2020, 2021 to actually come back even and then surpass to get the benefit because our freeze didn't have that in place.
Thank you, Susanna. A question for you. You using that 4% plus number, was that basically because of the increase in the inflationary costs over that time, over those years?
So that's an indexed adjustment that you know, if you look at Fred, I love Fred. Fred's a great resource. And that's where I get that number from for the state of Georgia. That 4.39% average is a seasonally adjusted increase in value over a historic period of time. So that increase in value, of course, is an inflationary increase. That's not because of new construction. That's the increase in value.
Okay. Just wondering how that gets skewed, as you mentioned, when we have big downturns and extraordinary upturns. Again, this is, I think, part of the challenge for everybody.
As an example, last year, you know, the Fred shows a year over year, third quarter 23 to third quarter 22 of a 7% increase. This last quarter was about a 2% increase. So that's gets averaged in with that huge downturn that we had in 2009 time frame to work out to, over the course of a 45 year period, 4.39%. It's the long picture.
Absolutely. I got a question from Chairman Huffstetler.
I was just going to say this, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, will not have any impact on your county because you've got a freeze in place. It will continue to stay in place. And so there'll be no mechanisms to do it all for your particular county. Now, I understand on the freeze what you're saying, and this does have 3%. I lived out in California 5 years, believe it or not. You know,
I'm glad you escaped, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, they said you can never leave, but somehow I got out. But anyway, I went under there under Prop 13, and there's been good and bad things from that. And people, when I got there, said, you know, your neighbor may be paying half the property taxes you are. Are you happy with that? And I said, what I'm happy with is that mine are not going to go up. And so that was my point of view. In my county, we put in, and again, this is a 3% increase, but we put in a freeze for the city and the county in 2002. I think the county has done fine. I think they've functioned very well there. Business has not been chased away. Just in the last month, Microsoft said they're putting $1 billion data center in our county, and we're not giving it away to them. They're paying their taxes and all of their school taxes, everything from day one. So we're attracting business, and I think that that's not going to be an issue with a 3% increase on this, because I've seen it with a freeze work well too.
Thank you. You got a question from Senator Dolezal.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. How much has the county millage rate gone up in the last 5 years?
Our millage rate's actually fairly stable.
Fairly stable or zero increase?
No, there's been a bit of an increase.
Okay. Can you just tell me what those numbers are?
23, it dropped a little bit. Let me see if I have those numbers. 23, we did drop just a little bit because we did that increase in the digest when we did a revaluation. I'm looking to see if I have those, the change in millage rates. So, and what they did was they shifted our millage rate a little bit to put more towards debt service. So that's why I say we've had some tweaks to it. Over the course of history that we've had this freeze into place, our millage rate started out in the somewhere in the 29 range.
I was just talking about the county millage rate. Do you know what that is? The county M&O?
Our county
because bond service, maybe this is important for the committee, for those that haven't dove into this yet. The bond service, the reason you're shifting to that's not subject to these floating homestead exemptions. So
here in Muskogee County, it does affect it.
So you're doing millage rate rollbacks on the bond service. This bill does not do that.
So the Muskogee County freeze, just as an example, the frozen value does affect how much you pay on the bonds. You just don't get the homestead deduction, the $2,000 that the state allows, or the $11,005, but you do get that frozen value up against the millage rate.
You guys have a population of about 205,000?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
I'm in Forsyth, which is about 250,000. We've had a 0% cap since 2000, so not quite as long as y'all, but for a long time. And it's had zero impact on economic development. In fact, we're in the county's in negotiations right now to bring an NHL hockey team to the county, and that has just really not been a factor, whether it's been for data center sites, industrial sites. We're the fastest growing county in the state, have been for over a decade, and that's been with this freeze in place. You said something that makes me tick a little bit, and that is that the counties have no other option. They essentially have to collect it from the commercial taxpayers. And I just disagree with that. Last year in Forsyth County, our school superintendent presented a budget that would have assumed the full millage rate at 17.3 mils that our current millage rate is at. And there was outcry from the community, and the school board was able to do a full 2 mil rollback, which is the largest rollback in the state. And they were able to subtract $60 million that otherwise would have just been spent by government. So I think that what the chairman is trying to do is to either make the county or the school board go to the citizens and argue as to why they need to spend more money, and the tool that they have to do that is a millage increase. And the reality is that these counties and school boards have been raising taxes on their citizens, maybe not in Muskogee because you've had the freeze, but all over the state of Georgia, without even having to raise the millage rate, and they just get to blame it on the property tax assessments. I think that what we see is that citizens, when they know that their money is going to good use, are willing to invest in government. But the elected officials have to be the ones to do it, not just some sort of, like Chairman Beach said, a tax on unrealized gain. Because we are taxing people out of their homes in the state, and we have heard it from all over the state. And so, your local delegation can remove the 0% rate or cap if they wanted to, but they haven't been compelled to do that. So that was
they have tried. We've tried multiple times. It's a constitutional amendment, and the voters have voted it down twice now.
Well, it's not. It's a local referendum, and so what you're saying is, so your voters like that this is in place. It's not damaging the economic development in the county so much that they've.
So I can tell you, overall growth in the state has been about 21%. That was a 22 number. The growth in 22 was about 21%.
Growth of what, ma'am?
Statewide growth, just overall growth in dollars. Investment, all of that. It was about a 21% growth in investment across the state of Georgia. Those
or what do you government budgets? I'm not sure what you're referencing.
So that's growth as far as new construction, and I look at things from what's getting built. So that was like there was a 21% increase across the state in investment into building infrastructure and buildings and houses and schools and all of that. 21%. In Muskogee County, we were at 8%. So
And your position is that the sole reason for that is that you all have
is one of the reasons.
Okay.
It's not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons.
a predominant reason in your opinion?
Yeah. Because we have one of the highest millage rates in the state.
How do-
Our
how do
school
you-
millage rate is
how do you-
23.321.
Excuse me. How do you juxtapose that with what I just told you, that the fastest growing county in the state also has the same cap that you're talking about?
So what I can tell you is that you've had it in place for 20 years. We've had it in place for well over 40. And we see the trend. And it's a long-term trend. And all I can say is I hope that Forsyth County continues to be successful. I know the challenges that Muskogee County has faced. And some of the stuff that they have tried to overcome. And here's
Suzanne,
the thing.
I'm gonna
this
have
bill
to cut you off,
doesn't-
Suzanne. We gotta have to wrap this meeting up in a minute. I appreciate the dialogue. Maybe something you all could take offline. Do you want a very brief question from Senator
I
Beach?
can
and then
answer that millage rate question before we leave this subject.
Sure.
Muskogee County in 2019, the millage rate was 40.501. In 2023, it was 38.561. So the 5-year trend is downward.
That 23 is not correct. It was
38. That's what I said.
It should be 39.93 for 23.
Well, I guess the DOR's numbers are wrong then.
On that particular one, yes. It's 39.93.
All right, Senator Beach.
Thank you,
one
Mr.
quick
Chairman.
question.
I'll be real quick because I know it was time sensitive, but I got to tell you, these counties need to live within their means. I mean, you made the comment, there's 56 million short, but they're going to find the money somewhere because they're going to spend it. And they need to look at cutting instead of spending. And Senator Albers and I will attest to this. Fulton County now is completely municipalized. And we thought when that happened, with the services being paid for by Milton and Johns Creek and Sandy Springs, that the spending in Fulton County would go down. It has not gone down. It's gone up. So, I'm a little bothered by the comment that we're going to find 56 million somewhere. Got to make some cuts. Thanks.
Suzanne, thank you so much.
very welcome.
Chairman Hufstedler, you want to close us out here?
No, I appreciate the committee's time. As I said, this was a hearing only. We want to make sure we've got everything taken care of on this bill and bring the best bill forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for coming. The finance meeting is hereby adjourned.